I'm excited to talk to this panel here and talk coaching, but also more importantly to talk about unity and just where we are with the state of the game. And this is kind of a cool moment too, from different regions, different backgrounds, different organizations. And I think the common theme that we'll talk a lot about is you guys compete. You're very competitive on the field, have been for years, but you're all sitting next to each other right now, and it seems peaceful so far. So I guess I'd like to start, just if you guys don't mind, I know who you are, but just to kind of give a little bit of background, Mike, just
my name's Mike Stith, obviously, with the Orange County Bat Busters. I've been doing this now for about 28 years, whether it's my team Tough Enough prior to the Bat Busters or with Gary and the Bat Busters, but I've been doing this for about 28 years.
I'm Tony Rico, president of the Firecracker Softball Organization, and I've got about 29 years. I got one on you. Finally got one on them.
I'm Scott Smith. I think I'm the young guy on this. I feel good about being the young guy on this panel. No, Dave may be younger than me, but I with the Texas Bombers. This marks my 20th year of coaching and the 20th year of the Bombers being in existence. So it's a big year for us, but I'm excited to be here on this panel with you guys.
I'm David Mercado, Athletics Mercado. 20 years. This is my 20th year doing it. I think it's our 12th, 13th year under Athletics, our 7th year, or our 5th year actually under Athletics Mercado. So,
Dave, I'm going to keep the mic there.
Okay.
So when were you first introduced to the game of fast pitch softball?
That would be when I had daughters. I guess I played a little bit. Not introduced. I played some fast pitch softball, a lot of slow pitch softball. But when my daughters came, I had to sell the boat and learn a little bit more about this game. So
there's a long line to that.
A long line, yeah. So, about 20 years ago.
What was that? Was it league ball? How'd they start?
Yeah, they started in rec ball. You know, just like everybody. They grew up at the ball field, and it was just kind of in their blood. We did that till about they were 10, and then we moved them over to Mark Campbell, and the rest is a wrap. Just took off from there.
Scott, what was your first team? What age division? What were you guys called? What'd you play?
Yeah, we were called. Well, the first experience I had coaching was in rec ball as well. They were called the Mystics, which is kind of weird as I say that now. But my daughter was too young to play on the team. Like most kids, most of our daughters, they started too young because we pushed them in. You're going to play this game. It's going to be fun. You're going to love it. But the Mystics, yeah, she was 7, I believe. So it was cool.
Tony,
long time ago.
Tony, who was your first team? What age division?
I cut my teeth with the Firecrackers. I don't have any daughters, so I was hitting instruction as a baseball instructor, and I had one softball player, and she introduced me to the founder, Gary Wardine, of the Firecrackers. At that time, he was just starting the program, and so I started here and have been here ever since.
Mike, not only what was your first team, but who was your first game against?
Well, I can tell you the first All-Star game in rec ball that I coached against, it was against Corona All-Stars, coached by Marty Tyson. He and I started at the same time. When Marty came out of rec from Corona, he had a team called, what were they, the Gold Dust or something like that. And they were obviously really good. And I had Tough Enough. I had formed Tough Enough at that time, but this was back in 95. And we've been going at it ever since. The last game I played in, coached in, was against Marty in Oklahoma City. So that legacy will just keep going. We have quite a tight bond on some of this stuff, but we've competed a long time.
So this is a question, sorry, Tony, for the girl dads. So what came, because all of your daughters are done playing. So do you remember that moment when your youngest daughter or your daughter was going to college and wasn't going to play, and you decided to keep coaching? What made you keep coaching?
I had been around it my whole life. My dad was president of Whittier Girls Softball back in the early 70s, and so I was raised on the softball field. I had coached high school football, and when I had all girls, my wife said that wasn't going to happen much longer. I just think it's just the passion to keep doing it. It's like, why do I keep doing it now? There's just that motor to compete, the motor to find the next good player, the motor to find the next good team, the spirit that comes about of a team. I think that's like a hunter looking for something, and you keep going, and that's what makes you go. Even when your daughters move on, that desire to do that is still there. So,
yeah, I think for me I think there was some questions. I think there were people wondered if I would stay in coaching. My wife certainly. We had conversations about it. I think she and I had a son, so there was some real big conversations about not coaching, and I think those conversations lasted about 10 minutes. Really, to be honest, it was about a 10-minute conversation, and she's always supported me, and she was like, "You want to keep doing this? I got your back, and let's do it." And I said, "There's no question I want to keep doing it," and I've never looked back. It was a 10-minute conversation.
Yeah, same. I think just competition's in the blood. I love to compete. I think we get to a point where we get too old to move anymore. It just hurts too much. So I think for me, just being on the ball field my whole life, and it's just something that's a part of me and a part of my family and part of what we do. So obviously watching them as much as I can when they were in college. I'm missing a lot going on here, but. I think I'll do this till I can't do it anymore. I just have a passion for it, and as long as these guys are playing, and then the bar's set there, that's what it's all about.
So speaking of that, well, and anybody can answer this. Before we get into actually like the unity aspect, you guys very successful teams now. I know you're all passionate about player development, but it wasn't always that successful, right? Can you think back to a time, like I like to ask athletes, when you kind of hit that rock bottom moment, and we're dealing with adversity or we're dealing with failure, and how you bounce back? What comes to mind if you think about that moment in your coaching career when you're like, crap, this is tough?
I think it's a very good point to cover, because it's the relatable part that we want all coaches that might be watching this to understand that, we might have a certain amount of success right now, but we're very relatable and everyone's been through the tough stuff. So first couple of years that I joined the Firecrackers, they're actually pretty fortunate because Gary had recruited a pretty good team. So they had done well the first couple of years. So I came in feeling really, really good about myself and thinking, okay, well, we've got this down. And I've been in this like 2 or 3 years. And so the humble pie for me came in after our 16 and under year. We had 1 year at 16 and under. And, you're just confident. All of us are confident in what we do. But in experience, I didn't have any. So I believed everything was fine. And 9 of our players went out and tried out for one of the best programs in the country, and all 9 made the team. And I, at that point, hadn't realized that dialogue and that recruiting or whatever was going on had already been taking place while they were on our team, because our families were looking. This was a business even back in 1996, and so our families were looking at what was going to be best for them. Of course, I didn't understand it back then, but I absolutely, not only do I understand it now, I would recommend that they made that decision because they went to a very established program. And I mention this to coaches all the time. I know it hurts. It hurts anytime a player leaves your team for any reason, but nobody steals my players. Our players choose to leave. And whether it's the right or wrong choice, they choose to leave. And that's a dynamic that's part of our culture. So, yeah, we entered our, I think, first year at 18 and under with 4 players. And so that was the first crossroad of, do I want to continue to do this? Actually, that's what Gary asked me. He goes, do you want to keep doing this? And I said, you got me addicted to this. So put a piece of paper on a telephone pole and find me 9 bodies. So that tells you how long ago it was. I didn't say put a digital ad out. I don't even think I had a computer. But yeah, we came up to 18 under with 4 players and had to start at the bottom and work our way up.
Well, I feel like I'm at rock bottom every time I play one of these 3 guys. I don't necessarily feel like we've always, because we were years behind most of these established programs, I've always felt like we were climbing. I never really necessarily, I don't mean that arrogantly from the standpoint we've never hit rock bottom, but I always felt like I was reaching for the next rung on the ladder, and we still are. I'm not joking. I haven't figured out a way to beat Mike Stith once yet. We've played 3 times. I'm 0 for 3. That sets a bar for me. Like that's a thing. That'll be a significant moment for me, right? Just personally, when I find a way for my team to do the things that it takes to beat a team of that quality. And that's a real thing. And Dave and I haven't necessarily got to play one another yet. It's just I've been. Oh yeah, we have. Yeah, we have. He whipped me in Colorado. I forgot about that. I forgot about that moment. How can I forget that? It was like 8-0 or something. But rock bottom is a weird thing when you talk about it, because I think it's how long are you willing to stay there, right? And the losses and the moments. But for us, it's been a constant quest to get to a place where we could be on level footing with some of these top teams in the country. It's been eye-opening for me to be out here this week a little bit and watch how they train. I've had a really deep insight to seeing how they train. I promise you, I'm going back. We have a meeting scheduled Friday to have a conversation. Like, you guys don't understand. Like, we still are. Like, we think they're around the corner. They're not around the corner. They're way down the road from us, right? Like, they're so far ahead of what we're doing, and that's out of respect for them all. Like, that's a respect statement. And that's why doing this and this conversations we're having today, they're growth for me. Like, they just truly are. They're growth for me as a coach. We're very conscious of where we are in the process. I think it resembles the state of softball in general. I think, the fast pitch sport has grown across the country, and in Texas we're doing a good job, but we still haven't crossed over that threshold yet. And I think the really smart coaches out there will appreciate the fact that we have work to do. And so never felt like we've been on rock bottom. Every time I've had to walk across the field and shake Mike's hand after getting beat, it is always just a little more gas, right, for me. And I think it would be that way for us all. And it's a respect statement more than anything else.
Rock bottom. I don't know. I guess that would be when we started. Similar story. I mean, we had 7 kids that we were practicing with, and across from Vista Marietta in a dirt field, a lot like Sandlot. We just kept going. We kept going. Another kid would show up. Another kid would show up. We finally had enough to play. Went out. We played American Athletics. I'll never forget. And he said, "Oh, we're gonna have a run rule." And I said, "This is our first game. I'd really appreciate it if we didn't have a run rule." And he looked at me and he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." I don't know, 45 minutes into the first inning, I understood what he was saying. So our whole road has really been a lot of follow and a lot of growth, learning the game, obviously being around, coaches like Mark and Rob and Bruce and some of the people that my kids were fortunate to play for. I've just really been a sponge, just kind of sitting back, training teams, I have my own knowledge, but obviously these guys have been in the game a lot longer than me. I still consider myself kind of the new kid on the block. But having that trail that I could kind of sponge and follow and absorb has really helped the way. And now the fact that we're sitting here communicating with each other, you know what I mean, and willing to share this information that we all took years gathering, I think is really truly something special. And I'm excited to really be a part of it, because I think it's going to benefit our game in so many ways. It's just, I'm really excited about it. So
mine's similar to Tony. I had my Tough Enough teams. We won 3 national championships in 5 years. And the next thing I knew, 6 of my players were gone. And it's like, what else can you do? But what I found at that time, and I look back on it, it's easy for me to look back on it now, because flying back from Marietta, Georgia, when I know I just lost, 4 college All-Americans, it makes you reflect on what you're doing. It allowed me to, I learned, and I spent 2 years with the Cruisers, and then ended up with Gary, which was going to happen long before, but ended up going full circle. I ended up with Gary, and it allowed me a totally different perspective to sit back as the assistant coach, as the grinder, and just sit there and go. And it exposed me to real work and real training and development. And I didn't have my eye on other things. I was only worried about the players, and that's what brought about everything else. So I guess anybody that, when these things happen, it's funny, there's probably guys out there, Stith lost his play. Are they all left Mike's team? Yeah, it happened. It has happened to every one of us. It's happened. And you just learn from it. And the good coaches they just put their nose back in it and just go. And like Tony said, we'll put our note on a pole and go get us some more players,
What's funny is you guys have probably lost players to each other, right? But yet we're sitting here today. And people are watching this like, what the heck are these guys doing, right? Like, why are they sitting here talking? They compete all the time on the field. But this is important. So why are we sitting next to each other?
The one thing you're going to learn with players is, I'm not going to tell a parent what to do with their child. I do, and like I've made this comment, I'm too old to change. I am who I am. And if it doesn't work for somebody, I want them to have an enjoyment. I want them to have a good experience. So if it's on one of their teams, then it is what it is. I know that it's nothing. I'm not going to change. So if they fit better there, then albeit. And then, because I know they know if a kid comes from my team, they go over there, they got a good idea what they're doing. So it's kind of, we're all in the same, we all do this, we're the same business. We're all the same people. And it's just different, like Tony will always use the analogy, they go to Burger King or McDonald's, it is what it is. And I don't get too upset about it. I'll just move on. I want to coach the kids that are there, not the ones that are not. So.
Yeah, I think this, again, might be one of the biggest points that we could talk about because, again, the relatable part of it to all the coaches across the country. So what we're trying to do, again, is benefit the industry, take our years of experience, and really provide something that's needed. But something that, again, we have to be very real about and understand is that the division that takes place in softball. And so across the country right now, we have boards and we have leagues and we have a lot of people coming together for the right reasons, but it doesn't take very long before all of a sudden you see somebody in the room that you don't like, right? You don't like them. And what we hear is a lot of times it's those very real stories that we all relate to, and it's overheard over maybe a player, someone stealing players, whatever it is, or maybe something happened into a game. And the example that we're setting here as a panel, and that I want every coach in the country or whoever's watching this to understand, is that if you have a table of tougher personalities, and I can say you can match this one, but I don't think you're going to find a tougher table to be able to find camaraderie with this group here. We've all been through this, and there isn't anything that that everyone out there goes through that we don't go through and that we haven't been through at some point. But it is about respect. Ultimately, we've respected each other on the field through losses, through the player movement, when at times we didn't even understand what that was. But I can honestly say that we're all here right now because we've never divided over a game or a player or something. And again, it hurts. It's not a pleasant situation, but it's part of our industry. Now we're to the point, again, to allow coaches to understand this, that we really want to not protect each other in a sense that a firecracker player never goes to the Batbusters or it never happens this way, but I would never take a player that stepped on Mike's face or let me say it differently. Like, let's just say didn't take care of business or didn't do it right? Maybe angry or whatever and just leaves. So I would like to know that Dave could always give me a call, or I'd like Dave to know he can always give me a call and go, hey, this one that's over there right now. Yeah. And what's even more important, because I had to learn this, is give a call and say, hey, what about this? Because when do you make that call? You may know something before the end of the year, but you can't make that call before the end of the year. It's just a real hard thing to do. There's a real small gray area of communication, and we know that communication takes place. And it could even take place ethically. So just the fact that somebody's talking about, hey, if you don't know what you're doing next year and you're available, give me a call. That's not unethical, but it is, hey, just letting you know. You've got to find a way to communicate. There's a way to communicate everything that you need to in the softball world, and there's a way to do it ethically, and we've put ourselves in that pit because this is worth it. The relationship with these guys is worth it, and we're going through still growing pains right now of figuring that out. But that's an example that I want to be able to set for everyone out there and realize there's too much in front of us and too much that needs to be done. So to divide over the tough emotional parts of this game doesn't make sense, because that's not the legacy that we want to leave. We don't want to leave the legacy of we couldn't work together because he's that's not it. There's much more out there. And this is in a weird way. Winning is great. This is really fulfilling, and we don't even know where it's going to end up. Got a pretty good idea, but.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in behind what Tony's talking about is for me, I'm obviously the one sitting here that's disconnected from all these guys. I don't see them on a weekly basis. I don't see them all the time. And so what I am, believe it or not, is I'm a big fan. I'm a fan of these guys. I'm a fan of their teams. I'm a fan of their successes. And when I see them do well, I generally am happy about it, unless they're on the other side of the field from me, which that's what I'm supposed to do. We're supposed to engage in battle, and that's good. But, my background in the military, one of the things you learn very, very quickly is you start finding, even in battle, in war, the guy on the other side pointing a weapon at you as a family has the exact same thing going on that you do. There is a level of mutual respect, right? Now, it doesn't change the fact that we're going to shoot bullets at one another here in a minute, right? And so, I think that gets lost in our sport sometimes is whether it's, we have angst over this because he beat me on this in this tournament. Believe me, as I was packing my stuff up from Oklahoma City after losing to Mike and them, it didn't taste good. Like it ended our season for our seniors, right? Those are tough moments, but they're moments we all live for, right? And so for our sport to be in a position where we have a group of coaches, and the nice part is, I think what's cool about this is we're just a small piece of this alliance, right? This thing that's coming together. There's coaches all over the country that are all dealing with the exact same issues we all have, trying to navigate the challenges of running programs and navigate building teams to the best that you can and send kids off to the next level and do all those things. Everybody's doing the exact same things, right? So why would we work against one another, right? Why would we let the system work against us to make our job as hard as it might be? And it's hard. But you know what? I'll never complain about it. I get to be involved in the greatest sport that there is. So for me, this is a blessing, right? That's the only thing. Every time I think about this, I think of it as a blessing, and I can't. It excites me to think of the future of what Alliance Fast Pitch is going to be. It excites me to think of the crazy battles we're all going to have against one another in these cool environments. And then when we walk off the field, we're fist bumping, and I'll probably be saying, Mike, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you.
Scott talks about being a fan, right? But when he starts talking about being on the other side of someone shooting at him, I feel like I do this. I just shrink as a softball coach and just, defending our country and doing that and being engaged in battle, as far as what I feel like I'm doing for the world, it just kind of shrinks and it puts you in your place because, again, you gotta understand. You can't be bigger than you think you are or whatever. You have to understand how to stay humble. So I'm a fan of you for that, brother, because I'm a son of a soldier. So that's big right there.
Yeah, you guys didn't leave much on the bone, but yeah, I was just gonna say, at times the game is just bigger, than us. I think it personally for me, at times it was just all about me, all about the team, all about winning, all about, there was a, and now it's at a point where, and I tell these guys, it's surreal for me, that it's all happened for me personally so quick. But to actually be back and look at it from a different perspective and say, you know what, I can give back to this game. This game, that's done so much for me and my family. Now it's time to, take what I've learned and whether it was licks or good and give back and grow the sport. So I'm that's the biggest thing for me. I'm excited to be a part of it for sure.
Dave, what a lot of people probably don't know is because we haven't been playing as much the past few months, we've been on a lot of Zoom calls.
Yes.
You've played against these two for years, right? What's something that stands out that maybe you've learned about them that, man, I didn't even realize that about those guys?
Well, here's the weird thing is I think I've played against these guys for 2 years, so I haven't had my feet too wet in the 18s. I started with younger groups and kind of brought them up, and that's where I'm at now. So, the timing's actually really good for me, to have the access and the funnel to these guys that I can kind of reach out, being a new guy at that level and learning a lot, so – I'm very fortunate, and I tell these guys that all the time. I'm just, the fact that I sit here with them is just surreal for me. These guys have been at this level for a long time. Mike's coaching the MPF, and it's just, I sit here with them today. So I don't know. I'm like Scott. Sometimes I'm just a fan.
I think what's impressive, Jamie, is Dave's got 20 years coaching. But to have the success he's had in the short run that he's had, that's why he's here too. And it's not about winning, but in order to get to that level, because there are levels to this, right? You hear that in different sports and different businesses, there are levels to this. But to get to the highest level so fast and to achieve what they're achieving, and then again, to be on the inside of this, because it's not like you just got to the industry in 5 years or 7 years. You've been doing this a long time. But that's impressive. And I would want coaches out there to realize, and somewhere as we get more of Dave's story, is that anything and everything is possible, but what is the recipe? Like what went into that? Because I would assume there was 13 years of experience before the 7 years of taking your team. So, but that's impressive, and again, absolutely belongs here because it's not just a amount of years with our organizations. It's really what you're doing at the levels as well.
Yep, my mind was blown. You said 2 years. Like, whoa, I should do my research before getting on a panel, Jamie. So Let's talk, because I know you guys are all passionate about developing players. And one of the things we really want to contribute, that's the great thing about bringing all these minds together, because it's unique, right? And it's not at the college level. This is at the youth level where young females are going through all kinds of different life phases. So when you hear player development, what does that mean to you and to your organization with what you're doing?
I don't know. It means different things to different kids. Some kids, you're just trying to get them to lock in to be there on time and do the things that need to do, and that's a victory. Other kids, you're trying to get them to backpedal a little bit. Hey, like hitting every day and being here lifting 6 days. Just be careful. Be a teenager. There's certain aspects as coaches, we want everybody to be here all the time and do everything they do. I have found there's been some times where you're trying to get kids to be a teenager. There's just a fine line to walk in anything you do. These young women now, and I've said this before to a lot of the parents, their world is something that we don't understand, and we don't now. We're trying to learn it. We're in contact with them a lot, but they go through a lot. And I think that part of me getting older, maturing a little bit, it gives you a perspective to understand their world a little bit more. And I was spoiled getting to coach some of the pros and asking them point blank, if you were 13 years old right now, what would you want to be coached? How would you want to be taught? And I'll never forget some of the comments that Lauren Chamberlain and Megan Wiggins told me about learning how their bodies. And some of the things that we do as coaches that we think are important, they thought that was stupid, But those are the spoils of age and time. But trying to get kids to understand, and who do they want to be? When you're all done with this, who do you want to be? And so I'll drive the ship. I'll do whatever they want to do. But at some point, it's up to them. They have to decide what they want out of this and who they want to be. And so I think that the best part, finding that ability to drive that individual person, because they're all individuals. But it's tricky. It's unique.
We're just talking about how we do it with the Bombers. I was fortunate. About 7 years ago, I met a guy who was the hitting coordinator for the Atlanta Braves, and we were in that mode where we were probably at about 40 teams in our program, and I felt like I was losing control of my ability to influence and not that I want it to be my influence. I'm talking about the program's influence on developing players. And what I thought was player development, the more I immersed myself in how to really, for us as a program, to develop players, I realized pretty quickly we weren't developing players. We were playing games and practicing. And now we spent a lot of time in person development, right? We have a lot of stuff that we do off the field. Very similar to what Tony and those guys do with Play with Honor, and we have our foundation for the heroes and try to teach them a lot of stuff and just develop character and stuff. And that's as rewarding as seeing a kid who's never hit a home run, right? There's some real big joy in doing that. But from the player development itself, about 7 years ago when I met the gentleman that was with the Braves, I basically just asked him, we sat down over a few cold beers and just said, hey, I need to figure out a way to run this more like a minor league baseball model. I need to be able to identify players. I need to be able to develop players. There's an individual process for each one. Not everyone's getting to, and in our case, the major leagues for us inside our program is our 1800 goal team, because that's the end of the line for them in our regard. And it was interesting to learn that process and start to implement those things. And I will say, when we did that, when we made that turn, we took off. We started putting our 1400 team was one of the best in the country. Our 1600 team was able to find its way into being one of the best in the country. And our 1800 team got better and found its way into that space. And I attribute that specifically to developing players. And we've gone about it a particular way. Like I said a while ago, my eyes are open to how different some of those methods are. I think we're, down for us. I think we do some things that are really cutting edge. And I think it's, right now, as I see it out here, I think it's one of the only things that's keeping us close in a lot of ways, right? We use technology to probably more so than probably anyone that I know of, when I talk to a bunch of people, because I want to learn more. But data and technology for us is the piece that's keeping us close to this group of guys, this talent, because we're not making as many mistakes putting players on teams that maybe aren't ready to play on those teams, and being able to identify an area that we can fix pretty quickly or make 10% better. So developing players has changed for us. And I think it's going to be the next part for us that as we implement other areas that we'll get better at. And hopefully we can close the gap even more.
I've watched Scott grow. I've known him for quite a few years now, and I absolutely agree with what he just said. I think he set the standard for us to understand, because he, like he had mentioned, he's trying to close that gap. So he did it the best way he could. And I can say from watching the teams that he was coaching individually, and then the growth of his organization right now, and I see that correlation. And that's something that's funny, because I want to say we're old school guys, right? And so we'll kind of have these conversations, and he'll open his computer up, and I start seeing graphs and all these things. And it's like going like 10 feet underwater. I'm down there just as how much can I grasp in about 2 minutes, because after he loses me after. I'm just not that. That's a new world for me. So I think that's interesting in how he's closed that gap with that. For us, it's always personal development. So I'm always interested in the person, what they think of themselves. I think with our older players, I feel like I'm trying to get them to realize their years of experience. So with our older team, we're often getting kids that have been playing 8, 10, 12 years. And so, but they don't own that. They're always so quick to tell you what they're doing wrong, or they're so uncertain about things. So, I use like the belt system. You don't act like a black belt. You've been doing this as long. So try to take ownership of that. And with our younger players, it starts with just understanding the process of thinking right, acting right, and then playing right. And if we can get to our coaches to understand the importance of athleticism, throwing mechanics, running mechanics, fielding mechanics, just basic concepts of how to play the game, because you can play this game unathletically and be successful because it's a strategical game. But where a lot of these players are ending up on the big stage on ESPN and everything else, nothing makes me happier than seeing somebody play the game the right way. I don't care where they come from. It's really that level of respect when they're playing the game the right way and they look good, and a Major League Baseball player can watch a softball game and go, wow, look at the way they're turning too. That to me is the big win.
Yeah, for us, I'm a firm believer in you don't get those years back. So we train our athletes from 10 years old to 18s. Not much changes. Obviously, the ball size and some of the speed of it, but we try to keep it the same. The biggest thing that I preach in our organization is understanding the game you play, not just doing things because you're told, but understanding why you're doing it. I think if you can do that, whether you're 10 or whether you're 15, whether you're 18, then you're going to have some value to you, which is life. And I tell them, you don't know your job when we're out here trying to execute stuff. There is no value in you. You know what I mean? Because you're just showing up, you're doing what you're doing, you're walking out the gate the same way you walked in the gate. So our standard's very high, our accountability is very high, and I tell people that our program's not for everybody. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. And you will get better there. It's not an option. Commitment's not an option, and we preach it. We do the best we can and do the best to make sure everybody improves.
I want to ask this question because I'm curious. It just can you guys think of a player that you had that, I don't want to call it the success story, but maybe just one of your proudest moments that you remember her at 10, 11, or maybe you got her at 14, and just to watch her growth? Is there somebody that comes to mind?
I had Folly Outview on my team for many years. She started with us. I used to make fun of her as the world's smallest Samoan. And I called her that many times. And she used to come in here. She lived down in San Diego, and she would drive up and come in and hit and do fielding stuff, and she would work out, and she was always a sub. She sat on the bench, and she was playing behind Amanda Lorenz and Alyssa Palomino, and she would just keep grinding. And I remember asking her mom, I go, is she okay? She goes, well, she's not leaving. She's not leaving. She's going to stay in. And I'll never forget her temperament and her just her ability to understand who she was and who she wanted to be. We were in the championship game a few years back, and Rachel Garcia's up there blowing gas, and it's a 0-0 game, and Gary Henning walks up to me in the game. He goes, we got to score one run, because Taylor McQuillan was pitching really well. He goes, we got to score a run. So naturally, Maddie Jelinek gets a hit, and the girl that was coming up is a slapper, went to Oregon State, and I called time. I brought Folly out. First pitch, Rachel blows a 70-mile-an-hour rise ball, and Folly just stands up there, boink, bunts it right on the ground, and Amanda Lorenz is on deck. base hit and 1-0. And the temperament, like, it's easy to say in that moment she wasn't, overwhelmed. She's not overwhelmed in her life. So when she walked up in that moment, and those are always, it's like, there you go. And at that point, obviously, look what she did at Oklahoma. She had a great career, and I'll never forget it.
So she wasn't a starter on her 1800 travel team?
Not until her senior year. Yeah.
It's a pretty good story right there, right? I'd say she had a great, and she still went to Oklahoma?
Yeah.
And she still got drafted to
She got
the Pro
rings
League?
and everything, and she's playing MPF, and So and just an incredible kid, just an incredible family. But there's everybody has stories like that. But this kid sat on the bench, and people would leave. We didn't get to play, we're going to leave. Well, Foley sat on the bench for 3 years, and look how that. Just trust us a little bit. But I'll never forget that. She's always been one of my favorites because of that.
Yeah, it's ironic listening to you talk about a player that didn't really get to start till her senior year on your team. I had a player like that. Her name is Tori Willick. She's gonna be a freshman again at Texas Tech, and she is one of the fastest human beings I've been around. But she was always she was a bomber from the time she was 12 years old, and I knew her. She was a tall, lanky kid, and just was always behind really good players. Yeah. Just always behind really good players. But she was the kind of player that you wanted on your team. And she was always on the best teams because every coach knew she's a good player. Everyone knew she was going to be a great player one day. And she finally got to the point where she made our team. She was always on our team, but she made the opportunity to become the starter. And like every other fast lefty, we got this one kid. We'll put Tori in the 9-hole, and that'll be a good spot for her. No. By the time she was done, she was hitting in the 2 spot for us, batting .600, on base every time, and every slap base hit was a double because she was going to steal second. And she was the kind of player you had to have in your lineup, and it did not shock me. She obviously went on to Texas Tech. And it did not shock me. They probably looked at her the same way. And in their abbreviated season, by the end of the season, she was starting for Texas Tech because that's what the type of player she was. And it was just the type of person she was. It was never quit in her. It was never a question. And those are success stories because it's the ones that are really good and always really good, well, they're always good. They're going to be fine. It's the one that you just know there's something in you that is not in everybody else's DNA that's going to carry you far in life. And so I'm a big fan of Tori Willick, just see what she does in life, right? I want to say I was her, I knew her win kind of deal.
For me, it's we've been through, in all our years of coaching, we've been through quite a few transitions in recruiting, the recruiting changes. And so up until the last couple of years, I've never really experienced having an unsigned senior on our team. And we had an unsigned senior last year. Her name is Carly Robbins. And when you get these families inside your office and that the strength of the emotion of the uncertainty and the anxiety that's taking place because they don't know, right? And then all their friends have committed around them. That reality for being uncommitted, you get in that process. When there was early recruiting, you're in that process as early as 7th grade. And imagine being on the shelf for 5 years, right? 5 years, and everyone else, because I always say to girls, like, everyone else got asked to the prom and you're still kind of waiting for someone to ask you. And it's really a tough situation. But it's just like, the importance of the outcome of the game, or that a player's going to get a scholarship, you can stress on that result and completely not even have an understanding of the process, or you can understand what goes into those two things happening and accept the results regardless of whatever happens. And so here is a kid, Carly Robbins, that she physically had the skills. I mean, I love to watch the kid play. But if I was to rate her on the inside on a 1 through 10 of her level of certainty, it was a -1. And so you listen to that, and it's disappointment, right? And it's failure oriented, and it's this, and it's I suck. Yeah, that comes in, and for me, the reason I'm comfortable with it is because I know the truth is in there, and it's the truth is what we want to get to. She knows how to play the game. So our responsibility as coaches is to not panic with them. It's to reassure them. And it's to reassure them. Remember, our jobs is to build that value in these players. And so, again, whether it's the way they play, their mental game, their physical skill set, is to give them that value and then help them understand and realize that value. And it's not always correlated to your 0 for 3 or your 0 for 9. It's really hard to be confident in this game when you're 0 for 9. But the reality is your confidence has to come from what you know about yourself, not what you feel about yourself. So to have this young lady and her family in my office, as we've had other families, but to know that you're at that, what you call that rock bottom of maybe your travel career because you're still on the shelf. And then to reassure them, not with false hope, and then to watch that, and then to nurture that, whether it was the happiness, whether it was just the enjoyment, whatever it is, and to slowly watch her put that back together. Try to create environments where it wasn't just about the heat and the tempering, but allow her to put herself back together, and then to watch it come out, and then watch her play come back, and then watch her teammates. Teammates are always going to respect you and acknowledge when you're playing well. And for me, I can't make that call until I know you have product value. I mean, you have to pass the eye test. Every coach knows right away when they watch that first impression, you can't get that back. So once it all started to line up and we made that call, and she's playing in the SEC now. And just like, Scott had said, I'm excited to see how she's going to earn what she gets because I know what she's capable of doing. But it's her story of being, at the beginning of her senior year, nothing. And what that feels like to all seniors, and especially with September 1st coming around. That's that for at this right now, this point in time. But again, to reassure everybody, listen, you have to do something really wrong, and I know how crazy, especially this year is. But you have to do something really wrong or be really on the outside for nothing to happen. Something happens for 90% something of these young ladies going to college. So just have faith in that, and then enjoy the ride. And yeah, it gets scary as heck. It's terrifying, but in the end, you want to know that you thought to yourself, it's going to work out.
Yeah, mine's kind of a no-brainer for me, and I'm sure she's probably played for all you guys, but that would be Val Pero for me. This is a kid that I had one of the best catchers that chose to go to Mike. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Here's a kid that's got an arm, she's got talent, but she is just, hey man, standing up, taking signs. That we just did not get along. We butted heads. We went at it. We actually lost to yes. We actually lost to your Gomes team in Colorado. Just mistake after mistake, and I absolutely lost it. I took the team out there. I absolutely lost it. I mean, it's probably from Q my number one blow up, who's been with me for 10 years. But I just lost it, and I said, you guys don't know how to win. Have any of you won? Have any of you ever won a national championship? And Val raised her hand, and I was just like, who did you win with? Are you kidding me? And she just starts bawling. It was Mark. And I said, I flew off my bucket, because me and Mark were close too. I flew off my bucket right at her, and I said, then act like it. You know what I mean? You're not representing that man today. And I was losing it. I'm being calm right now, but I was losing it. Enough to where after the situation, we went to a field right then and there. We practiced for 3 hours on the field, and I just rad. After we won PGF, and that kid had changed so much, and if you go back and watch that game, I did, and I just couldn't believe the level that she was at, the intensity that she was at every pitch. And after she got that done, I can remember her walking up and giving her a hug and saying in her ear, he would be very proud of you today. You know what I mean? But that for me, still to this day, that's it, man. That's it. So she's in the Pac-12 now. She's at Oregon State. I wish her all the best. I hope it continues because it was quite a battle. Val will be Val. So
she called me.
Did she?
Yeah, this past year, because she had what went on with you probably brought some of this about. Mm-hmm. She called me one day out of the blue. I saw Val, and I know Val like you know Val, mm-hmm. and she was kind of real sympathetic. She goes, I never got to talk to you after Mark passed away, and it was worth $1 million. Just, and she's tough tough nut to crack. But the fact that she called and just to acknowledge and say thank you for, she was with us for like 3 years, and then you kind of go, okay, job well done, and it came out well, and I'm glad that you did that because
we did our best.
It would have been.
It took a little bit of all of us. It took a little bit of all of us.
Tony, you brought up something that I think is really interesting that you're all going through, and hopefully people watching this can learn from too. So, 2020, right? Crazy year. When the NCAA comes out and they make the change for seniors, everybody gets excited, right? Because the seniors get to come back in college and play another year. But there's a trickle-down effect with that's happened. And then coaches can't go out and recruit physically this summer. And, a lot of the mainstream is going to look at college and how the NCAA affects. But there's a 14-year-old down there that's being affected that nobody knows about. there's a 16-year-old that's being affected. Just talk about what's going on right now with recruiting and what kind of conversations are you guys having with your teams and also with college coaches too?
Well, I can only speak from our position. I feel that, number one, that was a horrible decision. But from our standpoint, it was a horrible thing. The season ended. Life is such, and if that's the worst thing that happens to you as an athlete, then we're all going to live a pretty happy life. But they allowed everybody to come back, gave everybody another year. I use the analogy, it's like going to the car wash, and the cars keep going into the car wash. Well, the last car stopped, and no more cars can go into the car wash. And the people, all these kids coming through the system, paying their time, paying their dues, learning, grinding, it stopped. The food chain stopped. So now what do we do? I think that they've opened themselves up for just a rash. The transfer portal. It's just going to be so chaotic. They just created chaos is what they did. And it's going to be very important for us to hold our ground. We got to make sure to give these kids opportunities. But the kids aren't graduating, but the kids are still coming in. And so now there's a logjam. I think that it's very important for us to provide leadership and get them to calm down, keep working hard, refocus. But I can tell you, I've had conversations with many of our teams that we may have to choose another roadmap here. We may have to go to a JC route. We may have to go to schools that are, people think they're going to go to the SEC or the ACC or Pac-12 or something. We may have to change that target. And so we have to be level-headed and calm down and look at the situation for what it is and what's their ultimate goal, to play at this level, to graduate from college. Well, that picture changed. So I think we all have to provide a little leadership on how that's going to change. But it's the roadmap's different now.
Yeah, and 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what the best analogy is. At the end of the day, one of the things that's going to happen is, and this is just, we can all act like it's not. There's going to have to be a purge. Right? There's going to have to be – some players are going to have to get out of the way for these younger ones to even have a spot to come. I don't know what that looks like. I don't want to know what that looks like, to be honest with you. But I think and this is what I told our seniors that went off to college. If you don't think it was hard before, it's hard now. And so I personally feel like it makes our job at the travel ball level even more important, even more critical, that we prepare players to be able to compete with those kids, right? Like that's a real thing. Like you were going into the battle is different, right? The battle is different. And if you assume that it's going to be like it was before, it'll never be like it was before. It's going to at least take 5 years to get beyond that. So if you are a 14-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid, and we come to you and say, hey, we need to embrace this challenge head on, not ignore that it exists, and let's get to work, right? And if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. And are you up for that challenge? Because I think that's our responsibility. As travel ball coaches, our responsibility is to prepare players for the next level. That's if you just writing our job description down, that would be at the top of it. And that responsibility changed quite a bit with that decision. And the market's going to be different. A player that would have maybe gone to school in the Big 12. We send kids to school in the Big 12 quite a bit. And last year, that number might have been here. This year, for that same level of quality of player, that number might be here. And a year from now, that number may even be down here. And we have to be okay with, it's like having a car that depreciates. The car's worth what it's worth. Like you can be upset that that's what they're offering you, but that's the money that the market says. And so I think we have to prepare our players and prepare our parents, and certainly the younger ones, because if that number is shorter, how are you going to make up the difference? And let's have that conversation. Is it a different route, like Mike talks about, or is it a different means? So I think those are real things. I mean, it's not going away, and so we better just embrace it.
Yeah, what a challenge this whole year's been. Before Oklahoma City, you go through your stuff with your seniors, and it's their senior year. And for all the years that we've been doing this, and going into Oklahoma City, we had 4 games, practice games under our belt. So we played a total of 11. So everything that you thought might have happened, we're always prepared to adjust and kind of play on the fly. And so we've done that. As far as recruiting goes, and the uncertainty that's ahead of us, I came from parents that lived through the Depression and World War II, and so their ability to adapt and move forward, that's something that was a standard that was set for me. And I see in my head the phrase "only the strong survive." And so a part of our responsibility is to make sure that, again, our players understand their level of strength, understand their level of value, and then in the predictability of what may happen, well, if we looked at our industry, like 98% of the players are out there are so emotionally and mentally strong that your job's going to be really, really hard. I would suggest to all coaches to make sure that your players understand their value, so that they understand they actually have an advantage, because there's actually a lot of mental weakness out there. And a lot of people, again, that perilous kind of attitude of like, oh no. And we get that. It's all part of life that, I'll speak for myself. At this age, you start thinking, how many more years am I going to live, right? I hope I live a full natural life, or I'm at the end of a really bad life, or a little more than halfway through a good life. We don't know. So you start thinking about these things that could happen, but then are you going to be in fear every day of dying? Or are you going to be in fear? So getting back to making sure that your players are valuable, because first impression, like I said, whether it's I tell our coaches, an 8-second clip on your phone can be very powerful if it's the right clip. And it doesn't matter if you have a 7-minute video, if that first impression isn't there and that skill set's not there, then you're one of the 99 percentile. I believe in just behavior alone can present yourself into a smaller percentile and give yourself the best opportunity to be successful, have success in today's recruiting world. I also agree with what Scott said, that don't let your ego, the ego's a very powerful thing, and it's the destroyer of a lot of good people, because it's something that naturally kind of happens. But when our egos don't get checked, then we start to think about what we deserve and what we're worth and this and that. And right now, the most important thing that I think for our kids is to any type of help that they get financially into college. I don't care if it's 10%, 30%, whatever. These kids can enter their adult life free of school debt, or at least as much as possible, and not enter their adult life in debt or minimize that debt, because we know they're going to have their mortgage at some point. And then I know more people now than ever that are taking out seconds at a very old, in their older years, and they're going to pass on that debt to their kids. So the entire life is lived in debt. So if you think about it, an opportunity to play at a JC, at a D3, at a D2, and I've learned that from our teams across the country, that they're not all about where they think they're at. A lot of them will just secure a scholarship. So just keep that in mind and realize that, look, you may have to go in prepared to pay for your first year, at least at the table, but also know that with the transfer portal and with the mentality of so many players, and that so many players are leaving and transferring every year, that if you go in there even as a walk-on and prove your worth, you might get that money before your freshman year even starts, because we know the transfer portal is full every single year. So create your value. There's a lot of good news if you just make sure you create your value.
Good point. I was going to say that. I like it. No, routes and communication, that's the biggest thing. I think a lot of people aren't real clear on it, at least from a parent's perspective. So we just try to communicate a bunch, and even let them know that obviously the routes could and may change. There's a high percentage of that, and just make sure that nobody's getting blindsided. We know what we're getting into. Times are what they are. We have no control of it. You know what I mean? What can we do about it? Where do we need to go from here? So just trying to stay on top, let them know what's going on, and really that's kind of just where we're at right now. You guys covered it, man. I want
to do this one quick too, and maybe Mike and Dave, you answer these one. Obviously, I'm going to use the old term, Rolodex, right? Like, you guys could go through your phone and pick up and call any college coach right now. But you have younger coaches in your organizations who are just starting. What's your advice to them, or to any coach out there? If I'm trying to build my network, because I want my kids to go to college. I need to build relationships. What are you advising coaches to do to help build those relationships with colleges, or what can they do to help their kids in recruiting?
Everything. I think that relationships are key. I know for me, the more that I could talk to anybody and introduce myself, the better off I was. The earlier I could get to that, it just I started to notice them show up a little bit more, and I'd start to say hello and just developing that relationship, which obviously made the phone calls easier but from an athlete's perspective as well, getting them out there, having them do, as much as they can, getting their emails out. Obviously we do stuff for them too, as well as, them getting us their list. But that's a big thing for me,
We all have, like you say, the Rolodex. We all have people that we deal with. You deal with like-minded people. This situation has created a whole different perspective. I'm fortunate enough to have coaches that deal with my other teams that their Rolodex is much thicker than mine. And I have leaned on them to reach out, and we're going to have to be more aggressive. My whole problem is with the history of the Bat Busters, 75% of the coaches are scared to even walk up to my dugout, and it's a crying shame. I've often said that 60% of the kids go to the wrong school. They may graduate and do okay, but I still think they end up changing their degrees or whatever the case may be. But I wish more people would reach out and approach us. But now it's up to me. And like Dave said, it's not easy. I'm wrapped up in doing what I do. We're going to have to get out and speak to more people, and that's what it comes down to. But I take advantage of the other coaches in my organization that open those doors and help us. But it's about talking to people.
No, just a touch. I mean, Brian, I have a partner who handles a lot of that. I have probably Mark Smith, Rick Hovermill. I mean, like Mike said, there's plenty of people that do a ton, for me. That's the biggest reason for our academy, why we're successful, is the people around us. But everybody jumping in, everybody doing as much as they can, and it's going to take everybody. That's the biggest thing is we're talking right now about doing weekly Zooms, just because we're growing so fast and trying to get all our coaches on. So we're talking to everybody, and there's an avenue for them to get at us. And I think that's going to be a big key, in that, obviously, how we're going to approach that coming forward. So. Sorry for the blank, man. I'm getting old. I'm 50. I turned 50. It just happens now. I do it in the middle of huddles. Yeah, I'll be talking to the girls, and I'll be like, what was I just saying?
They all talk about it. They're driving home. Yeah. Did you see Dave did it again?
He did it again.
When they're impersonating you at the college parties in their freshman year and going, remember when he used to do this? He flew off the bucket and then forgot what he was yelling at me for?
That would actually be really funny. If an athlete was going to impersonate you, what would they do?
Well, I think I was telling Scott, I was telling somebody here earlier, I remember when we were playing college ball and certain players would imitate our coach walking out to the mound, right? And it wasn't an athletic walk. It was kind of an older walk. And I was like, oh, shit, we're at this age right now. Or I don't know what that's going to look like if they imitate, because I still think I'm athletic, but every 50-year-old something guy thinks he is until he sees himself on video. It's like, eh. So it's just kind of funny. With us and our coaches, I have actually learned a lot from our organization because, again, we've been in different personal situations with recruiting and been pretty fortunate. But our coaches have been like the 90 whatever percentile. They've had to work hard, and we have a recruiting advisory board. We've learned a lot. We've had a lot of coaches that have had to really grind to be successful and to create that network. And I think it's important, as Dave did to mention the Sean Brashears or Roman Gallegos. We've got Greg Metler. We got Ben McKinney. We have a lot of people across the country that have put this sweat and blood equity in. And the biggest advice I would give to all of our coaches is to establish credibility, because when you are feeling and consumed by the pressure of your parents because a coach walked up to the field, whenever that happens again, and you didn't give them a profile, and then they walked away, and then they're on your case because that coach walked away and that was somebody their daughter wrote to, that's a reality of what happens. You're trying to manage different things. But be careful of overselling, because you're establishing credibility with these college coaches. So the last thing you want to be perceived as is somebody that's going to walk up and shove a profile under their nose, and in the end they look at you like you're just trying to move product, because in the end you're not thinking of my best interest or anything. So in the end, I'm not going to have as many conversations with you. It's more credible, even though your parents don't want to hear this, it's more credible for you to establish a relationship based on communication. And again, I think I heard somebody say this, to tell a coach this, she's not right for you. She's not right for you. It's a quiet conversation, but establish credibility and build that relationship, as Dave said, because in the end, if you don't realize you're addicted to this industry, most of you do realize that, you're going to have 20-plus years. There are more 20-plus-year coaches now than ever before. When we were coaching in the 90s, you didn't have a lot of 20-year coaches, not at all. And so because you're going to be in this game so long, those relationships, and a lot of those relationships might be your players as they go on and coach in college, and next thing you know, you're working with your former players. But establish credibility, because that in the end will create your longevity in recruiting.
Last question. how do you handle parents, and how you guys probably have set a culture now, right? So if you're speaking to one of your new teams or another team, what is that culture? What are those boundaries, and how do you have control of the parents?
I would say, I feel fortunate, honestly. I think about the parents. Now, for me, the team I coach, that's one portion of the parents I deal with, but as a program director, I deal with all the other parents that are unhappy. But, individually with my own team is just be I'm super consistent with them. Like they know, right? They just kind of understand. They can speak with me anytime. There's some boundaries about what we can and can't talk about, and when we can and can't talk about those things. I've had people that come to our program and go, "Hey, man, do you have like a parents meeting? And do you have like a set of rules you hand out?" I go, "I never have a parents meeting, and I never hand out a set of rules, because I think the rules are just what we deal with in society. I'm not going to walk up if Mike's in the middle of conversation and want to talk with him about some problem that he's handling his own business. There's a time and place to handle all that stuff, and I think people kind of figure out that with me that I'm pretty consistent. When you see me, I'm going to be the same person, and so I think that's always a key thing, and I tell that to our coaches in our program is be consistent about how you handle parent issues, right? If you're really inconsistent, you handle this one this way and this one this way, parents kind of pick up on that, and they start to use that actually against you. But if your standards are very clear, and that's the military in me, like I just tell people, I spend time like, it's got to be tough playing for you because of the whole military. I said, well, not really, because I'm very clear. I don't negotiate standards with people. In the military, you don't put your hands in your pockets. I remember when I was a private, I asked, why can't we put our hands in our pockets? Because that's not what we do here, right? And it's not for you to understand. If the sergeant says don't put your hands in your pocket, get your hands out of your pocket. So I learned very on, I'm not going to negotiate standards with people that set the standard. And so I think if the standards are very clear on your team, and I think if you're very consistent in upholding those standards, it tends to fend off a lot of that stuff. Now, you still have the parent who wants their daughter to pitch more, wants their daughter to play more. And I just think those are general conversations you would have with any other issue in life. Like, let's just talk about it. And if you don't always like the answer, and every once in a while we have to agree to date other people, right? And that's okay too, right? I mean, it just is what it is. But I think if you're a young coach and you've got a new team and you're trying to create that, I think if you can establish the standards with your families, and eventually people will actually seek out to play with you because of those standards, right? They'll be like, that's where I want my kid to be, right? Because that's how I want my kid to be treated. And some people want you to actually be harder on their kid than you're like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm going to be consistent, right? So I think it goes back to consistency. And when you can pull that off, then you're going to start to establish a kind of that culture, if you want to call it that people will either embrace or they don't, and the ones that don't, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, he hit it exactly. It's honesty. It's just treat people like you want to be treated. It's honesty all the way through. Dave made the comment, sometimes parents, can we have a conversation? Like, you sure you want to have this conversation? We're doing it for the greater good of all. And so sometimes those conflicts do occur. If you handle them all with consistency, like Scott says, it just gets simple. When we've joked about we're getting older, when you get older, if you learn to just tell the truth, you don't forget it. Yeah. And if you start trying to BS people, you'll forget it and you'll misspeak at some point, and it's just best to be honest. We do meet with them early, and I have no problem meeting with a parent. I mean, they're paying to have their daughters play for us. I have no issues with that, but there are parameters, like Scott said. So honesty works out real well.
Yeah, for us, like Mike, we have meetings real early. We kind of set the standards, like Scott. We let them know what we want. How it is, basically the culture that's here. We do a lot through the girls. That's the communication that we want. We want them to take ownership early. We start at 12 with that. Obviously, we have those conversations as well. I make myself available. All of our coaches do. As long as it goes through the girl first, you know what I mean? Because that's really at the end of the day what we're trying to teach is them to take ownership in their game and how to handle stuff. If they have questions, they need to ask them, not mommy or daddy. But parents always do. They always have questions. They always want to know answers, and we make time for that. And like I said, if it's a conversation you want to have, we're going to have it. You know what I mean? And it's like Mike said, there's going to be a lot of honesty in there, so make sure you want it. If you're going past the daughter, because I guarantee you she knows it. Yeah. So pretty simple, cut and dry for us.
Yeah, I think it dictates the experience, because I had mentioned before that it's all about the kids, but so many times the kids become the third party in the equation because parents and coaches are bickering and fighting, and the kids hear everything on the phone. There's that daughters of the managers club, right? So the daughters that their dads are the head coaches, and the conversations that they've always heard at home, and they're always in a tough position because they're around their teammates. Plus, they know kind of they're in the know on what's going on behind the scenes, and it's really a tough place to be. My recommendation to all coaches out there is to never be overly in charge, but it has to be clear that you're in charge. So, in listening to Scott, and again, kind of that commander presence, that's command presence itself. That's that reassurance that someone is in charge. It doesn't mean that they have to have a big old badge and big old guns and let everyone know they're in charge every 5 seconds. But, all of our coaches have heard the analogy of you are the pilot and your parents are the passengers. And when I put myself in an airplane as a passenger, well, I'm emotional, I'm scared, I'm fearful, there's turbulence, I don't want to die, I want to scream at the pilot that he better do his job or she better do her job, and this better be. But the last thing I'd want to see them do is try harder. Try harder because I'm upset. If anything, that would expose a vulnerability on their side. So, and I think there's a kind of a natural thing when you get in this pretty young is you become, I want to say, friends with a lot of parents, right? So, you might hang out with them, or you go to this, and it gets really easy afterwards. Come on over, this or that. But you have to understand that we are of service to these families, and that not everyone is prepared for the tough decisions that have to be made. And for myself personally, this is just the way that I am. I don't want to develop a sense of a false relationship that's really dependent on the outcome of the season. Because if at the end of the year, whether it's the last game with this team or you're going on to college, we can't have a handshake or a hug or whatever that used to be, and we're divided, then I don't want any part of that friendship before that, because I'm here to serve you is what I'm doing. So with our parents, they hear this from me. I'm not your friend until your daughter's gone and you call me when your daughter's a sophomore in college, because now you've reached out to me on another level. And that caring, I know that they care about us, we care about them, but it's all conditional because we're there during our business time. But I think that that's really important. And it's not to tell coaches to not have friends in this. No, I'd like to consider us friends. That's either a good thing or a sad thing, but that's where we're at. And it takes time to build that trust. But be careful of getting too close too fast, and just protect yourself. And you can care and you can love and you can be friendly, but don't ever allow yourself to be hurt, because I think that's really important. And if you can get to the point to where, as Scott said, hey, we don't do that here, or this is the way we do it here. I remember my first year in college, that's all we heard was, we don't do that here. That's all I heard my first year was, Rico, we don't do that here. Rico, well, what the we don't do that either. Like what? So, but what you have is a respect from, whether they're the older sisters in the family, or then they understand the house rules, right? Or the older players. And so for our parents, it was always interesting for quite a long time that the new parents that might not know the rules of conduct, and they're understood, they're not written down, but we don't yell at umpires. We don't say, sit her down. We don't talk to the other team. We don't disrespect. We don't say things that a lot of times are accepted by other environments, because there's a certain respect. Well, it got to a point to where our parents were almost afraid to say anything. They were just sitting there. And I remember, I think it was 3 years ago, at the beginning of the year, I said, I'm going to actually ask you to participate more, because I feel like there's almost an over-respect of you're not supposed to say anything and you're just supposed to be there, whatever you think is professional. So it actually got overdid for a little while. It's not, you don't see that many environments. And I actually said, look, get excited, but just understand that this rules of engagement with them is we're always putting ourselves in their dugout. So no matter what's happening on this side, don't ever forget what it's like to be on the other side. And, it's kind of a cool thing to see when they pull it off, because then in the end, there's that respect, and it doesn't take something tragic for that to come out.
So we talk about a culture, right? We're changing a culture of our industry right now, right? Of just trying to collaborate, trying to create a community and bring together minds. So just last message to, I feel like this is how the NHL feels, like there's not actually an audience out there, but we're playing to the cameras. But so what's your message to coaches out there of why is it important? Let's remain as competitive as we are on the field, but why is it important for us to work together off the field right now?
We'll start with the youngest first. No, that's me.
You got it. That's what I said. You got it.
I think the real reason, and I think, and we said this, we were having conversations a couple years ago about this conversation, and the word out of balance came into play. and felt like the sport was a little bit out of balance. There's a lot of teams out there that are trying to do what we've tried to do, what we've done for years, and they're trying to do the exact same thing. And it felt like the system that was in place, which was called our sport, had it out of balance, where it was really kind of stacked against them to have success. And I said these guys, they don't need to do this. Like, they could just keep plugging away, doing what they're doing, training players, winning national championships, beating up on the Bombers, doing that on a regular basis.
We'll keep trying to do that.
You will. I know you will. But they didn't need to. They didn't need to do this, right? They didn't need to do this, right? We were all coming out here to California, playing them every year, and going through this process. But it says a lot about their character. It says a lot about all of the people's character that has gotten involved with the Alliance, to realize that the sport needs us to do this. It needs us to do this if it's going to be the greatest that it can be. And I think bringing all of us together, just like the word alliance is, I think that word's going to scare some people. I think it should really make people smile, that it's bringing teams together, and it's bringing coaches together, and it's bringing players together. But I think it more than anything else, the reason I think that the Alliance needed to happen, and I'm excited that it is happening, is it's bringing together so many different parts of the country, so many different levels of teams, so many players that, how cool will it be when all of our leagues are tied together and there's a national stats leader, and you hear little Jenny Jones in Biloxi, Mississippi is leading the country in home runs, right? And she plays for the Biloxi Blues. Whoever that, I don't know if the Biloxi Blues is a real team, but if it is, they are now. Somebody's going to name their team the Biloxi Blues. But how cool will that be, right? For a college coach to look at our national leaderboard for home runs and say, Jenny Jones in Biloxi, Mississippi is leading the country. Now, I think there's something cool about that, right? And I know our players in Houston, Texas are going to be like, no, we want our name to be at the top of that list, just like the players that are here. So I think the tying together our sport, tying together the history of our sport, all that's come before us to get us to this opportunity, I think we would be dishonoring it in a lot of ways if we just kept with the status quo. We knew it was out of balance. It wasn't good for the sport in a lot of ways. It wasn't good for families and parents. I think we would be doing a disservice to all of the hard work put in to make the sport as great as it is, and not do something to make it better. If we just took from it, we just kept taking from the sport, I don't know that I'd feel real good about that 10 years from now. And so for me, that's 100% why I'm doing this.
I just think that I have so many visions of this, and after coaching the pro level and coming here, it has given me such a wealth of experience that I've enjoyed greatly. And when you get to look at our sport from top to bottom, I've coached an 8-and-under rec team with no pitching and lost every game. And then I was able to coach the Pride and be successful and do all the things in between that we've been able to do. The one thing that we've always lacked, and Jamie, you and I have talked about this now for 4 or 5 years, is we have there's tournaments and there's events and there's things that people do, but nobody is developing the players beyond that tournament experience. A few of us get involved. You had asked questions about how do we develop players, and as you can hear from us, there's more to it than just teaching them how to hit and how to catch. It's that experience year-round. Well, we want to provide that for our sport. I want to be able to have kids all over the country be able to hear from great players that have played and are still playing, get experience on how to get through their situation, where they're at. We talked about the recruiting issues. It sure would be nice that if a kid that's a senior, an uncommitted senior right now, could just text message or email or get on a panel with some of our former players and ask those questions to calm them down. Because it's one thing when a 58-year-old man tells them, it's going to be okay, we'll get through this. It's another thing when one of their peers or somebody they look up to. And that's what we want to build. It's more than just the sport. The sport is a small part of this. The structure that we're going to build for the coaches, the teams, and the parents, to give them a little bit more education on what we're all looking for. I mean, just some of the things we've talked about the parents here. Some of the people have not heard that. So I just think that there's a lot more to this than playing the game of softball. I think that we can provide more education, more preparation for our players and coaches, and from one end of the country to the other. And it's no joke, all the people that have climbed onto this, because they do realize there was a missing link. And I think that we've touched a nerve of the country, and I think that this is going to be unique. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, Mike said it. I think growth of the sport, betterment of the sport, and that's the big thing, betterment for the athletes, all of the above. Like I said before, the goal for us is obviously to get these kids prepared, and I think as they get older, it gets tougher to keep them engaged. They're not dumb. They know where they're at. They know if it's a friendly. They know if it's a tournament. So the fact that, they're constantly fighting to be at the top of that leaderboard or that competition, when they get out of bed, they know where they're going is something that we constantly work on keeping them at. The fact that this exists now to where they know where they're going because they're not dumb, is something that's going to be very, very valuable, I know, to us as trainers, coaches, But, overall, I think that's kind of the big thing for us, and then the education is a big thing because I sit back a lot and I think about it, like I said, everything I had to go through to learn and the fact that that's going to be available now. I'm excited to share that with somebody, instead of, me getting out there and getting run ruled and going, oh, okay, I just see what they did to me. Okay. You know what I mean? Then, being able to go to somebody and go, hey, this keeps happening to me. You know what I mean? Why is this happening? Hey, well, check this out. You know what I mean? That's now going to be available, which is something that, we didn't have. So, it's exciting. I think it's going to be fun. I think a lot of people are going to engage in it, and it's going to grow fast. So.
I think that's a great point, and what David mentioned too. And he was talking earlier about doing the Zoom meetings and stuff. We originally started talking because we were in this unique situation, and I know you know this, but it doesn't matter what is around the next corner for you and your program we're always available to talk. So whether it's about, hey, are you guys doing this? Again, and what it does is it feels good. So how many people out there, do you remember the times when you were a kid at an amusement park or something, and I can think of being in the teacups for the first time at Disneyland, and your head's flying around, and you're looking at your friend across, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, this is the coolest thing ever, like this coolest moment. And right now, I can honestly say, you guys, this is one of the coolest moments of 29 years of coaching, because I'm sitting here, and the message that I want to relay to all coaches out there is that I personally want this for you, this feeling of this is pretty damn cool. Whatever that is and however you define that. And I think that's really important to understand that, because as I sit here, I'm looking at the logos, right? And I'm looking at the brands you've created, and these are really cool logos. Like, they are really good. I would want this stuff. And to see that creativity is there. And then we've got the gold standard on this side, because the Bat Busters going back as far as they do and being the gold standard of softball and continuing that legacy of that gold standard, and to be part of that. And so I want all coaches to know that you can do this. Like, you can do this. Don't let those obvious things stop you. Don't let your ego, like we all have it. Don't let the past experience. Learn to work through conflict. Learn to have those tough conversations, because as exhausting and as tough as they are, they're so rewarding afterwards when you know that you've cleared the air and that you're ready to move forward in a good way, and you're not just fronting something. You're not just putting words together to try to position yourselves. We want this for you. You can do this, and don't be afraid. Because if you find yourself afraid, then that's exactly why the Alliance is here. There's no reason for us to be fearful. But we understand that your position isn't like ours. So we've used our ability and our leverage to provide a path for you. And that's what we want you to understand, is this path is being built for all of you. And if we can expedite that learning curve so it doesn't take all of you 20 years to learn what you can learn, this network is there for your players. It's there for coaches. It's there for parents. There's a lot of different things that we really want to put into this. Again, having Jamie at the forefront of this and being the perfect representative of what it is that we're all trying to do. It's just, I'll just finish it with, this is pretty dang cool, you guys. So thanks for your time today.
It is cool. We're all in a teacup.
Spin in a chair.
I'm telling you, I'm picturing Tony sitting.
My hair was like this. Woo! When I had it.